Hey, welcome. This is The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. The material that I am covering, a lot of it will be found in my textbook on Kindle, Winning Your Fantasy Football Drafts, basically a textbook. This is lesson 3. Okay, so lesson 3 deals with psychological temperament and human biases puzzles, or puzzle, I guess. Probably my misspelling, my bad. Uh, Before I get started, let me just say, you're thinking, well, where's the data? I want, the goodies now. I'm setting the foundation. Okay. So you got to sharpen the axe and know how to work it before you start cutting down the data trees. Okay. So that's the whole point of uh, these lessons here, especially these early lessons. Okay. So temperament and human biases. This is kind of this thing that's of deep interest to me. There's a lot of literature out there, and this is not just in fantasy football, but investing, uh, gambling, these kind of things. Our personality and or temperament affects our success, especially things like the stock market. And we all have to deal with cognitive biases that exist. And these are, you can think of cognitive bias, and you may have heard this. To me, they're mental traps that will take your success level down. Okay? Doesn't mean we're resistant to them. We're humans, okay? We have a lot of this built into us. But if you can practice understanding that they're out there, and maybe when you're sitting in the middle of the quicksand and in a minefield, it's like, uh-oh, I need to be really cautious now. I'm in an area that is highly, highly uncertain, and my biases can lead me astray. That's about the best you can do, right? So that's some of these next lesson or two here. I think maybe 3. I don't know. We'll figure it out because I wrote some of these lessons a while ago. So things that when I was doing my research, your temperament and delayed gratification, and you may have heard, they will test children, right? You can have the cookie now, or if you wait 10 minutes and stare at the cookie, I'll give you 2 cookies. And some people grabbed the cookie. Some people were able to wait and had 2 cookies. So we are different, okay? All of us, people in your league, are going to be different. Some want the cookie now. That can be to your advantage, especially in trades and in dynasty or redraft. So you hear a lot about sell when the players are hot. Well, there's something to that. People, they're not going to wait for the 2 cookies. They want the 1 cookie now. So working on temperament and your delayed gratification, you need to figure out where you're at on these scales here. And I'm going to show you some scales here and how we figure out our temperament. So some questions to think about. Think about yourself. This is, nobody else is around, so you can admit the truth. Are you careful and deliberate? Or are you just spur of the moment? Oh, I'm going to grab this now. It doesn't mean that one or the other is bad or good. It just means where are you? Because you're going to have to work within the confines of who you are. And if you don't like that, or you think it's preventing success, you probably should change. Are you a confident decision maker? Or do you worry and are second guessing yourself a lot? Okay. Some people say, well, if you second guess, you may find things you miss. True. But you always hear, well, I had that player, or I should have shoulda, woulda, these kind of things. Can you wait on the results with great patience, or do you need the one cookie now? Can you wait for the two cookies? Can you change your mind and adjust if something happens quickly? In other words, if there's an injury or there's something that's changing, coach is fired, player gets in trouble, what's going on? I think last year with the COVID situation, there was a lot of moving parts. Games were delayed, players were on and off the COVID list. There was a lot of things going on last year. So if you did well last year, then you'll probably survive, in the upcoming season, because I'm not sure COVID's going 100% away. In fact, as a microbiologist, I suspect it's here to stay, and we will probably need COVID vaccines for new variants as they come upon us. So I think this is just going to be something we're going to live with. We live with the flu, right? It kills people. So, it's not something new and unusual. It's been happening a long time. So can you change, or do you stick to your guns? I'm going down with this ship. You know, this player is the best ever, even if nobody realizes it or they're not proving it. I'm not getting rid of them. There's something called sunk cost fallacy that's at play there. I invested so much time and effort to draft and pick this player. I'm not getting rid of him. Well, that can help or hurt you, especially in Dynasty. So I think we should all divide ourselves into different temperament types, and you need to be honest. And if you have some good friends, ask them. It is that important for you to at least have somebody outside to confirm or not, because you need to be aware of your tendencies. Okay. I assure you, if you've been in a dynasty league for a while and you've traded and been kind of active or not active, people know that. Your league mates are paying attention, right? You know, Rome's burning and you're fiddling around. Oh, they take advantage of that. So be aware that your league mates are paying attention. They're going to, he always drafts this or he always does that in the draft. They're going to use that to their advantage. So you need to think, are you tipping your hand on things because of your temperament? So here's something I made, and this is based on just my reading out there. Uh, so in decisions, there's a scale: careful, deliberate to spur of the moment. I'm not giving a value judgment. I'm just, right now, we're just trying to see where you're at. Are you confident? Made a decision, I'm not going to worry about it? Do you second guess and you're always worrying? Do you need your feedback now? Did I do right? A lot of these draft sites, they will rate your draft because a lot of people want to feel good about it. Hey, feel good after 16 weeks when you got that check in your hand. Okay, so I can wait. Okay, I don't need somebody telling me I drafted good or bad. I don't seek that out. Okay, I think you kind of know already. You just, maybe you're, man, I really messed that up. It's hard to admit that. Can you can you change on a dime, or change in stone? That means you don't change. So that can be good or bad. So again, there's no value judgment here. I just think people need to be thinking about where they're at on these scales, and then how that applies to things like trade, drafting, interactions in your league. Okay, so when I read the literature, it's just the best and this is probably more in the stock market, but the best traits for investors that are careful, confident, who can delay gratification, but can adjust on the fly. Everybody, that seems, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, easier said than done, and maybe you think you fall into that, but maybe you really don't. So I think we can consider fantasy football an investment, time and effort, and so that's why we're having this lesson 3. Because you should figure out your strengths and weaknesses and try to make changes. May take more than one season. I don't know. Maybe you can never change. I don't know. So you need to analyze again, admit to yourself. You don't have to admit to others, right? But I think it's best if your friends, right? What's their opinion? If you know some good fantasy players that win leagues, ask them. Especially if you're in a league where you always are losing, say in Dynasty, ask the top dogs. You know, they may not tell you, right? Because they're collecting off your weaknesses, right? They're manage your weaknesses for you. Okay? You should manage your weaknesses, not let your league mates do that. You know, I got a cookie right here. Come get it. Need to wait. It's a trap. So you need to figure out your strengths and move towards those traits that are working for you. If you're a player that makes decisions fairly quickly and second guess, you're probably not a winner. You might have guessed correctly, but then maybe you trade that person away too early, or, yeah, I shouldn't do that. In other words, if you're drafting and it just happens the way you draft, you've got 4 running backs in a row. How you gonna feel about that? You're 4 rounds deep and all you got's running backs. Maybe that's just the way it needed to be played. That's tough. Will you take a weaker player just to feel good? I think there's biases. And I don't know what people call it. I call it a balance bias. By about round 6, you're really wanting, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers kind of thing. Assuming it's not a 2 quarterback or a tight end bonus league or something. But, just kind of overall, that's kind of a balance. In other words, would you draft 6 running backs in a row or 6 wide receivers? So if you plot that as the extremes, are you falling in the middle more than once? I think you'll see a lot of players, if you look in, some of your leagues, especially if you've got records from last year, the year after, or the, couple years, look and see, did the majority of players try to get balanced by, round 6 or 7? And if you've got the records, look at the players that were off balance. They grabbed 2 quarterbacks first 2 rounds in just a regular PPR league. How well did they do? Okay. Or people that drafted the first, 2 tight ends in a regular PPR league. What's going on? Every year, things are going to change. That's why there's always opportunity for us in this game. If it didn't change, we would all play the same. And there, I don't know. Would that just be injuries decide winners? I don't know. But you should never assume that anything you're doing in fantasy football is always solid. At best, it's kind of squishy. So again, you need to take a hard look at your temperament, your personality. Hopefully it opens your eyes to your mistakes you've done before. And again, maybe your dynasty fellows are not the ones to ask to try to find and spot your weaknesses here, but I'm just saying there are people that play that, right? Certainly in poker as well. you know, sit down at the table. Where's the sucker? Is it you? You need to get up from the table then. So this was an interesting experiment. Journal of Experimental Psychopathology. There's something that people have, and they call it intolerance to uncertainty. And decision making, immediate decision making in high risk situations. I would probably, not sure I would use the word risk. I still think I would call it more high uncertainty situations. But anyway, I didn't get so deep into the paper. I think there's even confusion at academia about risk and uncertainty. Anyway, intolerance to uncertainty. So I guess there's a scale, and maybe we should have put that on our scale of our temperament. So here's the experiment they did. Intolerance of uncertainty and decision making, trying to tie that together. So 70 undergraduates who were either high or low in uncertainty, intolerance of uncertainty, they call it IU, completed a series of decision-making tasks involving what they consider risk, I would say uncertainty scenarios. And then the students rated their confidence in their decision, how they feel about it. And then they were given limited options, but they chose. And then they recorded the time it took to choose that. So you have people that are highly intolerant to uncertainty or very tolerant to uncertainty. So people that avoided uncertainty, high in IU, became less confident as in their decisions across blocks of trials. In other words, over a time, making a lot of decisions, they kind of were becoming unraveled. Does that sound like a draft? How many rounds? 16 rounds? Are some people as sharp in the 11th or 12th? I mean, you should be eagle-eyed sharp the whole time. People who were low in intolerance to uncertainty or could handle uncertainty. It's a weird way, kind of a double negative. Low in intolerance, so they could tolerate uncertainty, actually became more confident in their decisions, which maybe they're too confident. Turns out the time it took to make a decision really didn't change between the groups. But people that had that high level of intolerance to uncertainty tended to be less likely to change their decision when presented with extra new information or an additional response versus those that were low in intolerance. It wasn't statistically significant, but it was close. So, not everything's cut and dry. Probably needed more than 70 undergraduates, maybe 700. So I don't know what this group is doing. I don't know if they've had a follow-up with more rounds of this. But I thought it was important to at least consider what they were finding. So I think if we apply what I just talked about, the intolerance of uncertainty here, the extended exertion of self-control when making difficult, repeated decisions reduces your or a player's ability to make decisions over time effectively, especially when the threat is considered unpredictable or uncontrollable. So I think over time in a draft, your decisions are probably less effective on average. So you need to be aware of that going into the draft. Some people, it's just my hypothesis, like to get a little inebriated because that makes it less uh, difficult making decisions. Okay, I'll just throw a dart at something. Nobody cares. Fifth round, sixth round, eighth round, 10th round. Who cares? I got my quarterback. So there's a exertion of self-control. And there's some other work that it reminds me that they've actually done some decision making over a long period and gave people like snacks for glucose to help their brain kind of recharge, and others were just given water. And there is some type of correlation between feeding your brain and decision making. So I would definitely not bring alcohol to the draft. Bring you a few, not like a whole chocolate cake, but some low carb snacks, Jack Link's beef jerky or peanuts or something. Okay, maybe one beer, but that's it. Okay, got to be strict. So people who are high in intolerance of uncertainty are sensitive to uncertainty by the definition, right? They don't tolerate it, therefore they're sensitive to it. And it is very stressful. And I'm not sure people that are super high in intolerance of uncertainty probably play fantasy football, or certainly probably don't play it well. I know that's the people you want at the poker table. I got that. Okay. The ones that fold up like a cheap suitcase. I got it. So people who are high in this intolerance to uncertainty probably have reduced confidence and going to approach decisions with less confidence. So these are the ones that play 1 year and get their butt kicked and you don't ever see them again. Or, they leave in the middle, or they quit setting their lineups because they can't handle it. So that's a good, if I'm in Dynasty, just kind of see who starts playing out and flopping like a fish in the, out of water here, who's doing the old crappie flop about halfway through the season if they're not doing well. Okay. Crappie is a type of white perch here in the South. So the opposite, individuals who are low or are not very sensitive to uncertainty, okay, and probably less likely to require additional information. So maybe they're too confident, but they're certainly different from their opposite brethren. And they may find decision making less difficult, but maybe they're too confident. And you're thinking, sounds like you're advocating a moderate approach. Isn't that what pretty much everything we do as humans? They say do it in moderation, right? So there's truth to that. Does it mean I'm moderate in everything? No. Okay, I'm human too. Okay, no, I don't. Okay. Sitting there making these lessons and talking, that's obviously not a modern approach to this. Okay. I am intense that way. You can't really get a PhD if you're moderate. You can't. You got to live, eat, and sleep science and research, especially early in your career. You got to be able to walk through walls, chew nails, 80, 100 hours a week, living, even, breathing, dreaming. Okay. You're saying, well, that sounds pretty. It's not physical, right? Okay. It's the mental toughness. I can getting a PhD. Anybody's got a PhD in science, they've got to be fairly mentally tough. Okay. So problem orientation, problem solving confidence, and this is another paper that I found, is influenced by previous problem solving attempts. So probably your approach to draft, for good or for bad, has been set by your previous drafts. So that may or may not be a good thing. Okay, so you need to think about that. Are you kind of falling into a rut, as it were? Those that are low in the intolerance, so they can handle uncertainty, feel confident about the same level of information, and they'll have increased confidence when looking at alternative courses of action. Again, that, as you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best, but that's going to be their decision. And note in this paper, accuracy is never discussed. Okay, so you need to think about how you do. But remember, making a decision, you can't judge it based on the outcome. All you can say is, I made a good decision under the constraints I had. The outcome may have not turned out well, but I made the best decision I could. And you've got to separate that. That's a hard thing to do as well. Not sure I probably should talk about that. There's Dr. Annie Duke has written Thinking in Bets and Making Decisions. She's written 2 books. I would recommend both books. She tries to tease you out from those 2 worlds of kind of looking, I did good, so I must have made good decisions. Or you got lucky, right? How do you know that? Remember I said you overestimate your skills and underestimate luck, probably? We all do that. So just be aware. Your decision making cannot be based on, how accurate you were. You just got to set your process up, and that's part of the lesson. That's why I call this the process. We hope that at the end of the day we're making money, right? The process. So there actually is this website. You can go to it. It's an online test, and it looks at scales, anxiety scales, and intolerance of uncertainty. And there's 2 factors they look at: your perspective, intolerance of uncertainty. They have 7 questions. Basically, they're testing the premise, I cannot stand to be taken by surprise. Okay, you think about that. How do you stand on that? Can you deal with a surprise or not? Some people hate surprises, don't like surprise birthdays. Inhibitory intolerance to uncertainty. When it's time to act, uncertainty paralyzes me. So then do you default in the draft to the ADP? Can you reach 2 rounds down and grab a player? ADP. Public says you're making a mistake, because if the player you reach down for is so good, how come the ADP is not so good? Okay, remember it's an average. Okay, so just be aware of the positive and negative of the wisdom of the crowds, which we'll talk about. That's what an average is. You get the average wisdom of the crowd. So, perspective versus inhibitory. Take the test. Where are you? So it's, again, those 2-factor structure, and this is what my testing revealed. I have high level of anxiousness, probably not surprised there, but I have low avoidance to uncertainty. Okay, so I am not sensitive to uncertainty at all. I will tolerate uncertainty. So I think at the end of the day, that's what gives me an advantage in my drafts that I do, in the leagues that I play in, is, yes, I don't just go crazy and try to take every potential sleeper and these these, gambles, but I'm not afraid of it either if the situation calls for it. And remember, it's always changing. So you're making decisions in the middle of an earthquake. Okay? That's kind of how I feel the draft is. It's shaking all the time. Okay? So how do you deal with it? But I am highly anxious. I think that drives me to do this kind of stuff, like write articles and do my textbook. Okay, this is the end of lesson 3. Thanks for your attention. I hope if you've seen all 3, this is, to me, the teaching style that I like. This is what I've been doing for many a year teaching. Okay, almost 30 years been doing this. Okay. One of my pet peeves, and this is not to talk to anybody, but when I see a lot of the industry podcasts, it's they're a talking head. Where's the data? Okay, show me some props, some graphs, some bullet points, and I got lots of data coming. Okay, it's going to be more than you want data coming in these lessons, but right now we're just, delayed gratification. We're carving one sliver off the time in that spear, that fantasy football draft spear we're making for 2021 and beyond. Every lesson helps you sharpen it just a little bit more. Okay? So no, we're not doing, y'all don't want to see my old woolly talking head in me saying this. I think you can see the slide, and I try to make the slides not so crazy. I mean, there are some crazy slides, and there's a lot of it, but I try to make it so you get the points. Hope you do. Hope you enjoy these lessons. My bottom line is to try to make you a better researcher and know yourself, and I think that's part of my early lessons, is to try to do that. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Come back. We'll be doing the next lesson soon. I wouldn't jump out of order. Okay. Okay, take care.